Okay, so we can formally begin. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music's free, virtual, and very informal monthly series called Conversations with Our Curator. So I am Melissa Ziobro. I am our curator and a professor of history here at Monmouth University in beautiful West Long Branch, New Jersey. Tonight, we are chatting with June Skinner Sawyers about her book, We Take Care of Our Own: Faith, Class, and Politics in the Art of Bruce Springsteen. Publishers Weekly called the book a dynamic portrait of the complicated political and social influences of a rock legend. So I'm so excited to chat about this with June and with all of you. But before we dive in, I always have to make a few housekeeping announcements, and apologies to those of you who are regulars and hear me make these announcements over and over again. But we have a lot of new guests today who might not know much about the Bruce Springsteen archives. So it's my job to spread the word about the good work that we are doing and hope to do in the future. So, if you're not super familiar with us, we are, as I said, at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey. That's just a mile from the beach and up the road from the famed Asbury Park. We preserve the legacy of Bruce Springsteen. We are his official repository, but we also celebrate the history of American music in all its diversity of artists and genres with our exhibits, our programming, and our publications. As a public historian, I'm always looking for ways to get people excited about history. And I think that music is one of the most accessible prisms through which we can access our shared past. So, just very excited about all of the work that we are doing. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox there. We at the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music are currently in the midst of building a brand new 30,000 square foot facility. You can see the artist's rendering behind me on my fake Zoom screen. We are set to open, fingers crossed, in the spring of 2026. So our new building will feature a roughly 250 seat theater, the archives for researchers, and roughly 9,000 square feet of exhibits looking at American music history and, of course, Springsteen and the E Street Band. So you can see more about our work on our website, springsteenarchives.org, and our social media. I'll drop our link tree in the chat later for anyone who's not already connected with us on socials. I would also like to note that you can always donate on our website if you are so inclined, because we are, of course, a 501c3 and we are out there fundraising like all the other museums across the country. Again, I'll put the link tree in the chat in just a moment so y'all can access that if you would like to. Um, just a couple other things I would like to highlight very quickly before we get into our conversation with June. We recently released the call for papers for a forthcoming academic conference that will look at Born to Run as we approach its 50th anniversary. So, for all of my educators, academics, authors in the audience, you'll want to make sure you go find that call for papers. If you haven't seen it yet, submissions will be due in March. And as I said, the event will be in September. And also, this is very exciting. This is a little sooner. On January 30th, we will be hosting a free in-person event on campus. We're having Dr. Sean Willentz from
Oh, nice.
Princeton join us to deliver a talk called I Don't Write Protest Songs, Bob Dylan, 1963. So that's really exciting with the recent Bob Dylan film that's been out in theaters. So again, that's free and that's in person on campus. I hope some of you can join us. Perhaps not our friends from Sweden who are on the call this evening, but some of you, I hope, can join us at Monmouth University on the 30th for Dr. Wilentz's talk. Okay, so you can see all the details about our future plans and events again on our website, springsteenarchives.org. Okay, thank you for letting me introduce us a little bit to those of you who are perhaps not so familiar. But we will get back now to tonight's program. This series is almost a year old now, Conversations with Our Curator. And as I said, free monthly. And I sit down with authors who are writing about Springsteen and also about American music history more broadly. Um, I initially ask a few questions of our authors, and then the really special part, I think, is that we open it up to the audience and you have the opportunity to ask questions. Our guest authors are always so brave and just opening the floor to the audience and seeing what comes. We always have these wonderful, robust discussions. So, with that, June, if you are ready, we'll dive in.
Do my best.
Okay, awesome. So, if you could just introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, tell them a little bit about your background.
Yes, well, I'm originally from Scotland, and I've written about my when people ask me what I write about, my short answer is from Scotland to Springsteen. But I write quite a lot about music in general, especially I've written about the Beatles, about Celtic music, cabaret, and more recently, before this last Springsteen book, Bob Dylan's New York. And I'm also an associate producer of a documentary that came out last year on the Scottish diaspora called Voices Over the Water, which is on PBS Passport. That's the short answer.
I love it. I love it. From Scotland to Springsteen. So, again, as I was looking, I'm researching you as I do all our authors, and I was like, my goodness, what an interesting and diverse catalog of books you have written, right? Local histories,
Right.
travel guides, Chicago beer.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's probably a crowd pleaser. But of course, Bruce. So tell us a little bit about how you were drawn to writing about Bruce.
Well, I first saw Bruce in, I'm going to date myself now, November 1978. Um, that was at McGaw Hall at Northwestern University. And I knew about him. I read about him in the papers and the music reviews and all that. And I'd never seen him live before. And that was the usual 3 to 4 hours. And I wasn't quite used to seeing a live person for 3 to 4 hours. It was very intense, obviously. And I often tell people that who ask me that question that I went blind seeing Bruce Springsteen because by the end of the evening, my eyes were so out of focus, I thought I was going blind that night.
You were
Fortunately,
blinded by the light.
I was blinded by the light, literally. And by the next morning, I was back to normal. But for a few hours there, my eyes were really, it was remarkable, in a good and bad way. But that was my introduction to Springsteen. And then I saw him again in 1980 or 82 during the Darkness River tours. I tried to see him during the Born in the USA tour, but it was sold out at Soldier Field in Chicago. And a funny thing is, I didn't see him again until 2000 live. I've always read about him and bought the albums and all that, but I didn't see him live. I'm not sure exactly why I didn't to go to the shows until the Rising. And ever since the Rising, whenever he was in Chicago, I've seen him every time. So over the years, I think I've seen him a mere 18 times. Now I have friends who've seen him 100 times, so I have a long way to go.
Mhm.
But I think what appealed to me about Springsteen, his music, was the lyrics, the storytelling. I think in another life he could have been a great short story writer, like in the vein of James Joyce, The Dead, that kind of thing. Um, so and also, well, so the words and the music, the melody. So words and melody, that's what's appealed to me about his music. And ever
So
since then, I just been continuing my journey with Springsteen.
it's funny how you say you only saw 18 shows because
Well, yeah.
before I took this position, if someone said, "Are you a Springsteen fan?" I would have said, "Of course. I grew up Springsteen is part of my earliest memories. But
Right.
now I meet so many people who have been to 200 shows. I
Oh,
feel like I don't
see?
deserve to say I'm a fan, you know?
200. I mean, I'm telling you, I have a way long way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So actually, I'm curious, do you think
Yes.
that the fact that you are a fan of his music makes it easier or perhaps more difficult to write about his work?
See, I have a problem with the word fan, I suppose.
Okay.
I'm more because that just to me that means maybe you're not really critical because
Okay.
there's some albums I don't like.
Yeah.
Uh well some songs I really don't like. So I don't like everything. So I admire his work and what I know of him as a person. I've only met him backstage once. I've never interviewed him, for example. People always ask me, have you ever interviewed him or really, talked to him? And I've only met him backstage, and that's a little interesting story right there if you want to hear that little anecdote.
I was just jotting down to ask you,
Oh,
so
okay.
please.
Well, it was during one of the one of the tours, which was I guess the Rising tour. It had to be the Rising tour, and whenever he was doing his baseball tour, but he did that a few times, and he did one it was in August, whatever year it was, 2000, 2001. I'm not sure exactly. It was at Comiskey Park in Chicago where the White Sox play. I'm not a baseball fan, but I know the White Sox play there, and that was in August. Now, a few weeks later, we went to Asbury Park. I think it was like 2003, 2004. We went to Asbury Park and we won. They had a little competition going on. If you buy something, you get a raffle ticket. Then you put it into the pot, so to speak. And lo and behold, my partner was chosen as the winner, the grand prize winner of the Asbury Park Chamber of Commerce raffle ticket. And the prize was you get a chance to meet Springsteen backstage. So this was Labor Day weekend, again, whatever year it was, when we got the call on a Saturday afternoon, as I remember. And the bad news is the concert was the next day at Meadowlands on a Sunday. So can you imagine the airfare? So of course we couldn't do that, but they said, not a problem. We'll be able to arrange to have you see him wherever he is on the next stop or in your area. So he was in Milwaukee at Miller Field, I guess. So we drove up there about a month later, late October. It was chillier by then. And we ended up on stage during the second half of the show. And afterward, we went backstage and met him. And that's I had my Asbury Park sweatshirt, and then he signed it on the back with a heart. Love Bruce and the heart. So that's my only time I met him. So I'm more of an admirer than a fair weather fan, that kind of thing. So I look at it that way as opposed to just being a fan, if that
Okay.
helps.
Okay. Very interesting.
Okay.
So, inevitably, when we do these programs, we have some folks in the audience who have read the book already and
All
some
right.
who haven't. They're coming to learn about it and see if they're going to go pick it up. So, for anyone
Right.
who has not yet read We Take Care of Our Own, give us a thumbnail overview of the book.
Sure. Yeah, it's right here. It's a small book. It's intentionally a small book. In the acknowledgments, I refer to it as a stocking stuffer of a book. So you could have bought it for Christmas. You can always buy it for next Christmas. It's never too early or too late. But I wanted to just in a very condensed way explore his journey, his beliefs, beginning with his childhood, of course, in New Jersey, and ending with his most recent works, especially from well, the letter to you, but before that, Springsteen on Broadway. Um, and I want to follow his life as seen again through his albums, through his songs, and the variety of influences on his career, both musical and non-musical. And by non-musical, I was interested in particular in literature, but also art. So there's a chapter I discuss the what I see the connections between Springsteen and Thomas Hart Benton, Grant Wood, Edward Hopper. So I guess I look at it through maybe a kind of different sort of lens than most people do, but I'm always trying to find connections in whatever I'm writing about. And I think Springsteen has so many connections, not just musical, but with these various non-musical themes.
Mm,
Um, and I want to also want to explore particular topics and themes, including community, a sense of place, America as the promised land, um, the myth of the West, and especially in the last chapter, in the coda, mortality.
mm.
So that's a thumbnail sketch of it.
Okay. Thank you. So I was hooked right from the beginning of the book when you talk about Springsteen and patriotism. Now, it's
Yes.
actually not my job as the curator of the Bruce Springsteen Archives to defend Bruce Springsteen in any way, but I am always just
No.
personally maddened by discourse that refers to him as unpatriotic. And this discussion is, of course, especially timely as we are just coming out of an election cycle, right? Where
Right,
Bruce chose to endorse a candidate to go out on the campaign trail, and that invited the inevitable backlash. But anyway, in your book, in the opening, you write Bruce Springsteen is a patriot, but hardly of the simple minded, jingoistic variety that some
right,
of his critics have painted him out to be over the years. Rather, he's
right,
a complicated patriot who sees his country through gray colored glasses. Can you comment
right.
on that a bit for us?
Sure. And I need to mention too that I come from it as an immigrant, and I still have a green card, so so I look at it as the book and the content as an outsider. So I think that's important detail to keep in mind. I think my point I was trying to make that he doesn't believe in blind loyalty. He believes in criticizing the country when he thinks it's necessary. And in the one of the many epigraphs in the book, I have a quote from the New York Times columnist Charles Blow, which I think is part of the themes of the book. Honest critique is a pillar of patriotism, and I think that Springsteen certainly, in my view, believes that very much. At least that's my interpretation of it. Um, and so he's not afraid to criticize, and he's done it so many times, sometimes in more oblique ways, whether from Nebraska, which wasn't intended to be a political album per se, to more recent albums like Magic and Wrecking Ball. And it's not just I mean, the criticism or the observations he makes, or maybe from a critical point of view, could be in songs like Seeds, working class people, men, a family having unable to find work and living out of their car, or songs and albums about the Iraq War or the Great Recession. It's all part of his the songs that he writes about that some may think are unpatriotic, but I imagine from in his point of view, it's the ultimate in patriotism by criticizing what he thinks should be criticized and what could be done better in the country.
Hmm.
That's
I'm
my
reminded
view of
of
that.
a Mark Twain quote I have hanging on the door to my office, and it's patriotism is supporting your country all the time and your government when it deserves it, right?
All right, yeah,
Um, so I think that's just fascinating. I could spend the rest of the hour talking to you about that, but I will keep things moving.
right.
As a Catholic school graduate myself, I was very
Oh,
interested in your discussions of Bruce's relationship to his religion. And of course,
right.
he attends a Catholic elementary school in Freehold, St. Rose. We'll say he doesn't particularly enjoy his time there, but he is definitely brought up a Catholic, as you write, quote, raised on a studied diet of ritual and incense.
Yes.
Talk to us a bit about how you think that impacted Bruce's worldview.
Well, he had mixed emotions, feelings about growing up Catholic, and I think he's described himself over the years as a lapsed Catholic. Um, yes, he does appreciate the traditions, the rituals of the Catholic Church, not so much the dogma of the Catholic Church. And but so many of his albums and songs have a Catholic flavor, Catholic theme. I think was it Tunnel of Love that Father Greeley called the most Catholic album ever, among the most Catholic albums ever released. And then there's songs like Jesus was an only son, where it's blatantly um, at least if not Catholic, but at least religious and spiritual. And so many of his songs can be called, or and albums can be called spiritual. I think he referred to Born to Run as being a very spiritual album without being Catholic per se, but a very spiritual album. Um, because in a sense, in a word, it is about seeking and is about searchers, whether they're tramps or whatever you want to call them. They're searching for something better, and that is also part of the spiritual journey. Catholicism is part of it, but not exclusively so.
Hmm. I'm sure we'll have some questions from the audience about that in a few moments, but
Okay,
let me go through just a few more of my own
sure.
questions here. You list some core themes in Springsteen's work. I'd like to recite them now for those who perhaps didn't read the book yet.
Mhm.
And then I'd love to hear how you settled on this list.
Right.
Community, compassion,
Yeah.
dignity,
Hmm.
fairness, faith, honor, justice,
Hmm.
loyalty,
Hmm.
patriotism, and
Yeah.
rule of law.
Those themes, among many, are I think in my view, the core themes in his lyrics, in the canon of his of his works. Um, and I think it comes down partly to his Catholic upbringing, and partly to just his belief in his family belief in FDR's the New Deal and the old-fashioned kind of Democrats that his family believed in, because the Democrats his family thought growing up were for the working class, and that was all part of it. And also part of it is also just the golden rule and the common good and what some call the social gospel, helping each other, um, no matter who you are, and taking care of our own. And I mean that's why I chose this that particular song. Not a great song but but the lyrics behind it, it's the theme behind it. I think that sums up in a way, in a phrase, the entire Springsteen ethos. We are there to help each other. And if we're not there to help each other, why are we here on planet Earth?
Hmm. Okay, now one last question from me before I turn it over to the audience. This may be a bit of a wonky question because I'm the
Uh-oh.
history nerd here, but I
Okay.
would love to hear a little bit more about your source material. So, was there
Oh, yeah,
any
sure.
particular archival collection that was useful, or did you conduct any interviews, or were you really just doing a textual analysis of the
Yeah,
lyrics? How did you write the book? What inspired you? What was your
right.
research process like?
Right. Well, since I've written four books previously on Springsteen, I had a lot of material already on hand. Quite a lot that I didn't use. But also, this, I must say, something about the background of the book. It started out as an e-single. It was about 40, 50 pages altogether over 10 years ago. And I wanted to turn it into a small book, again, a stocking stuffer. And my inspirations, as far as the format goes, was two in particular. There's the author Tom Piazza, the great writer. He did a book called True Adventures with the King of Bluegrass for Vanderbilt University. Small book, 100 pages. I recommend it. And Patti Smith. I'm not comparing myself to Patti Smith, but her wool gathering, again, 90 or so pages with photographs. And I wanted to I saw the book as adding more information, adding an afterword by somebody who's well known and hopefully a Springsteen person, fan, admirer, and Andre Debussy III is that. Um, so it was based on not so much not interviews, but the analysis of the lyrics, also deep reading, and also I wanted to add original photographs. So I took all the photographs except for one, not of him, except there is one of him, but of themes. So like Patti Smith in her wool gathering book has themes that sort of comment or complement the chapter that was my idea behind the book. Um, and added also wanted to add notes and two poems that I wrote. One about Asbury Park, and one about the West and his relationship with the West, inspired partly by Westerns, his album Western Stars. So it was a combination of many of the various ideas. I wanted to make it 150 or so pages, not more than that. Just a small book, a fun book, something that's yeah, that's people who may not know much about Springsteen could get into, and hopefully enjoy it as much as somebody who knew a lot about Springsteen. That was the intention behind it, at least.
Was going to say you very successfully straddle a book that in the end is accessible to those who aren't, the most hardcore Springsteen
Right.
fan, who aren't perhaps the biggest readers, but there's also content in there that's
Yeah.
thought-provoking enough for those who think they know everything about Springsteen, right?
Right.
Um,
I want to bring it up to date to the current time. So again, the last chapters is about because in concert he sings about in the last album, Letter to You, the last album of new material, about mortality and fellow band members no longer with us, and that was a big part of wanting to bring that aspect of his life that I wanted to discuss in the book. But it's not meant to be thorough by any means. Again, it's a short introduction in a way for some who don't know him, but then again, it can be more than that for those who do know him. So again, a combination of things.
Yeah, and you did it so well. Kudos to you on that. So,
Thank
we
you.
have a big audience tonight, and I want to make sure that I don't monopolize the
Okay.
conversation and that I leave plenty of time for the audience to ask questions. So, I'll pause with my prepared questions
Okay.
and pivot to the audience. You are welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can put it in the chat and I will read it for you. So we actually had someone, John emailed me a question. If this was one of my students, they would get extra credit for being so prepared that you emailed the question in advance. So I'm going to go with John's question first, while the rest of you perhaps locate your unmute button or type in the chat. So June, John's question
Yeah.
is, in We Take Care of Our Own, you convincingly document Springsteen's belief in a spiritual afterlife by parsing both The Rising and My City of Ruins. But doesn't his song Paradise, where the would-be afterlife is seen as empty, suggest some doubt on his part?
And I would say yes. I don't talk about paradise in the book. Um, but for those who don't know us, it's on the rising, and it's the context is the 9/11 attacks in the Middle East and a different kind of religious upbringing. So that's why I didn't include it, because it's different from the Catholic Christian upbringing that I mentioned. That I'm focusing in on the book, but it is one of my actually ironically it is one of my favorite songs on the album. And it's also I think I maybe include it with Empty Sky as part of a dual representation of the Middle Eastern themes on that album, along with You're Missing, which I call, in my mind, I refer to it in the book, I think, as a secular hymn. But yes, but I do agree with John. There is doubt from the character's perspective in those songs, especially in Paradise. So yes, I would agree with John on that point.
That there is some doubt. Okay. This is from John in the chats. What is June's perspective on the explosive freight train that is a Bruce Springsteen live concert? The fireworks, the launch pad, the reentry, and how does that relate to your work on The Boss? Is there a relationship between the two, the explosive performances and then the more
Yeah.
thoughtful writing?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think in one of my books I refer to her as the fun Bruce and the serious Bruce. So in his concerts, you get both. Some people may not like the serious Bruce. Some of the audience may leave and go for a beer break or a toilet break or whatever. But Um, I think it's important and it's that he includes both sides of himself, and he's always done that in the live shows. And I myself prefer the serious Bruce, but that's just me. I like both, of course, but if I had to choose between the two, I would choose the serious Bruce.
There's a quote in his autobiography, and he says something like, I was never going to be Woody Guthrie. I liked Pink Cadillac too much, but there was work to be done. And he's kind of commenting on how he can do both. He can be the party Bruce and the serious Bruce,
That's
as
right.
you
That's
say.
funny. One of my favorite songs happens to be Pink Cadillac.
Yeah,
I do like the fun Bruce too.
the fact that I can recall portions of his memoir like that is a little alarming. But anyway,
No,
I digress. Here's
no,
a
digression
question.
is good. That's good.
Here's a question from Donna. She says, I'd love you to say more about the connections between Springsteen and art, Hopper, etc., and how that relates to the themes that you feel are central to his work.
Yes, I chose those three artists, Thomas Wood Benton, Thomas Hart Benton, excuse me, Grant Woods and Edward Hopper, because I did see in their work um, Springsteenian, Brucean themes. I'm making up two words now. I think I referred to Thomas Hart Benton's work and how it compares or relates to Springsteen as having a rough democracy. And I think I refer to the simplicity of Grant Wood's paintings, the most famous ones, of course, but even the ones that are not as well known. But I do spend the most time on Edward Hopper and, of course, Nighthawks. And I see Nighthawks with its themes of isolation and alienation, the musical equivalent in Springsteen's work would be, to me, most obviously Nebraska. So I spend a good many sentences and paragraphs on the connection, the link between that sense of isolation and alienation in the work of Edward Hopper and in particular Springsteen's Nebraska. And I have a little section about the black and white photography and how important that is to the sense of alienation and isolation in Nebraska, and the whole, and of course, the cover, the red and the black, iconic imagery of Nebraska, just hones in on those two particular themes, and I see again those two themes, isolation, alienation, throughout Hopper's work, and I see it in some or a lot of Springsteen, not all of it, of course, but I try to make that connection. I also make the connection between Thomas Hart Benson and like Larry McMurtry, because I go back and forth between the importance of the West in Springsteen's work, the West as the promised land, LA as the promised land when Springsteen moved out there, his parents moved out to San Mateo. So California is the larger promised land, is a big part of what I write about. Um, and also John Wayne's movie, The Searchers, which I lead somehow from The Searchers. I end up talking about Nomadland and Brokeback Mountain. So I'm trying to make connections where maybe most people may not see those connections, but the common theme is, in a word, alienation.
Fascinating. Thank you. Really, really.
Thank you.
So speaking of kind of digging and deep thoughts and making connections is a question in the chat that asks, was there anything you were researching and pondering in the course of the book writing process where you just ended up having more questions than answers?
Well, not really, because I'm focusing on the three themes in the book, faith, class, and politics. So I knew I wanted to hone in on those three themes and include as much as I could within a short length. So I knew I couldn't do everything, of course. So I was very focused on those three themes and what I wanted to include in those three themes, and though and the short chapters that are in the book. So I was pretty I would like to think I was fairly disciplined when it came to that.
Okay.
Melissa,
Audience.
can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. We've got some great questions, and June, you're doing a tremendous job with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Arlen, please go ahead.
June, how much do you think John Landau has played in Bruce's development in terms of the whole blue-collar troubadour of the working class? And I'm quoting Time magazine in 1985.
Oh,
And the converse of the question is, where do you think Bruce's career might have gone had he stayed with Mike Appel? Because I believe that's where the great divide happened, and the emphasis on the lyrics and the social ideas in Bruce's music that you talk about and write about.
right.
How much of that is Landau?
Well, I think Landau, if Landau was not his manager, I don't know. I think it would have been maybe a different career if Mike Appel or somebody else maybe would have been his manager or taken over in some fashion.
Because in my comments,
yes,
Appel wanted Bruce to sing the national anthem at the 1973 Super Bowl, and he was laughed out. But that means Appel intuited so early on these Americana aspects of Bruce to have that ballsy idea. And when he first heard Bruce sing in his office, he thought God had sent him the Jesus Christ of rock and roll. So some of the ideas you talk about, Bruce's spiritual side, Appel saw that right from the get-go.
Right.
Anyway.
But he wasn't a father figure.
Right.
And or a big brother, maybe not a father figure, but a big brother figure. I was going to say it's hard to be a saint in the city, and would he have led to reading about Guthrie, Joe Klein's book, or watching? I mean, he was watching Badlands by himself in the middle of the night somewhere, and when he was as he was writing the songs in Nebraska. But I think Landau was such a he encouraged him. Yeah, more of a mentor. Yeah, he encouraged him to grow as a person and as a writer, as a storyteller, and to learn and to learn. I mean, he was a college dropout, a community college dropout, but he was always interested in learning. He was always curious, and I think Landau stoked his curiosity.
Exactly, he was an autodidact, but Bruce, and in a way. But that's exactly, I think, Landau's influence. Because where else in the history of the 20th century can you find where the greatest critic of an art form became the manager of one of the greatest proponents of that art form?
Right.
It's only the Landau-Bruce relationship.
I mean, you have Alan Grossman and Bob Dylan, but
But Alan Grossman was no John Landau.
Tell me about it.
Well, I'm just saying that's the difference. Is that Landau was an intellectual mentor, not a businessman like Grossman.
Right. Absolutely.
Great question, Arlen. Thank you. Here's a question in the chat from Eric. Eric is pondering the image of America around the world. Sometimes America is seen as a symbol of hope and optimism, other times as a symbol of oppression and hypocrisy. How do you think Bruce navigates those different sides of America's role in the world?
I think he sees both sides, and that's why he's been criticized for those who consider him unpatriotic. I mean, he writes about it in consider land of hope and dreams. The country, I mean, the possibility is there, the hope is there, the potential is there. Doesn't always work out that way, but I guess I would imagine to most people outside the U.S., Springsteen is probably looked upon as the good American, as opposed to the ugly American. But yes, he definitely sees not only both sides, but many sides of the country, and he explores those themes, those aspects of the country in his songs, good and bad, on so many levels. So it's not it's not a problem for him to criticize and to see the many aspects of the country, for better or worse.
Hello, I would like to add
Colleen,
something. June, hello. Good to
hi,
see
how are you?
you. I was lucky enough to be included in a couple of June's anthologies
Yeah.
collections on Springsteen. And I was interested, I haven't read your book yet, but I was interested in your thoughts about Springsteen and visual artists.
Oh,
And I wanted to add something that was very remarkable uh, about Springsteen and his art collection. Uh,
uh-huh.
when he came to, I curated an exhibition that opened at the Wiseman Art Museum at the University of Minnesota in 2002.
Okay.
Springsteen Troubadour of the Highway.
Yes, I saw it in Newark, New Jersey.
Yes, and it also
yeah.
went to Monmouth University too. But
Okay.
and it happened that he was on the Rising tour.
Right.
He came to do a concert in St. Paul a week after it opened.
Okay.
I had been in touch with his management and people on his team as I was organizing the show, and he did come to see the show.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, and the museum was closed. It was a Monday, and the Wiseman has the largest museum collection of an artist named Marsden Hartley. He
Oh, yeah.
was an
Marsden Hartley, yeah.
early American modernist working in the 19 teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. He was part of the Alfred Stieglitz
Yeah.
group with George O'Keeffe, Charles Demuth, and as we walked to the gallery that the Springsteen show was in, Bruce went up to these Marsden Hartley paintings instead of, turning to go into his gallery.
Right.
And I started talking about, oh, this is Marsden Hartley. He's this American modernist, blah, blah, blah. We have the most work of any museum. And he said, yeah, I own some of his paintings.
Wow. I didn't know
And
that.
then, which I just floored me because, his music is, as you talk about, very much like social realism of
Yes.
Benton, and kind of mythological, social realism. It's not, completely
Right.
realistic. So I was just floored. And then he also went up to a painting by Milton Avery, who's another, he was a
Okay.
little later than Hartley, but did representation, but abstracted, very colorful, beautiful. And he said, oh yeah, I have some Milton Avery paintings.
Okay.
So I was just very surprised. And I did, I can't even remember how this happened, but there was a show at the Wadsworth Athenaeum in Connecticut,
Mhm.
and it was a Hartley show. And somehow or another, I learned
Hmm.
which paintings were on loan from Springsteen
Okay.
in that show. And he had a couple of series that Hartley did in Maine.
Right.
These fishermen
Yeah, he
and
was known for
families.
his
And
maritime
there
painting.
was one, they're really like these burly men,
Yeah.
really beautiful portraits of this family that Hartley knew.
Right.
And there was one that is really set up to look like a Last Supper kind of painting with
Oh,
the family sitting at a table, looking out at the viewer like the Last Supper of
right.
Da Vinci. Anyway, I think there's interesting work that could be done about Springsteen's own art collecting because
Yeah, I didn't know he had was an art
yeah.
collector.
And I know that speaking of Landau, from what I've read, Landau collects like old master European paintings.
Okay. Well, there you go.
And, you know, which is kind of bizarre to me. But I don't know. I just think there's something really interesting that may open some things up about Springsteen uh, that are unexpected.
Yes.
But
Having
I don't
said-
know if anyone can, you know, find out. Maybe the
Right.
you know, the museum, the archive could
Just
do
a
a
small,
project with
I
them.
can give a
Can I
small
just
little
add, can
tidbit.
I just add something to that as an artist?
Yes.
Bruce's early work was filled with a lot of pop art imagery. Smokey Stover appears. He talks about, you know, the Batmobile and I'm a Rocker. And
Right.
but early on, there's a lot of, you know, Superman leaping tall buildings in a single town. So it's interesting that later Bruce is into more, I would say, abstract art, outsider art,
Right.
in a way almost. But interesting that he starts out more taking from, you know, American pop culture around him. We'll
Right.
meet that giant Exxon sign.
Yes, of course.
That could be, you know, Ed Ruscha painting like Standard Oil.
Right. And I need to say, I don't know if Springsteen has any interest in Benton, Harper, or Wood. That's just my take on what I see the connection between him and those artists.
Yeah.
I'll
And
give a
that's-
little sneak preview to everybody, and you can't hold me to this because the exhibits are in development currently, but one area of the museum that we're planning currently is dedicated to recreating Bruce's writing room. And we
Oh,
expect
wow.
that we will use some of his art in there. So while
Oh,
we're on the
great.
topic of art, that's just a little secret intelligence for everybody. Stay tuned.
Wonderful.
Stay
Right.
tuned for more on
It
that.
could be your next book, June.
Okay. Thank you,
Get a
Colleen.
bunch of us to write about Springsteen and visual
That's
art.
right. Anthology.
And movies, you know, movies, of course,
Yes.
people know, you know, The Searchers, and he's talked about a lot of films that have influenced his work.
Carolyn Madden wrote that book, her book, Carolyn Madden, right?
Well, that's right. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Soundtrack.
A few years ago.
She
yeah.
was, yeah, she was actually our last conversation
Exactly.
in November. So it's
Yeah.
all connected.
Yes.
Thank you.
Here's a question. Thanks, Colleen, for those thoughtful comments. This is a question from Deborah in the chat. I've always been intrigued by the misinterpretation of Born in the USA. It's often been used by politicians as a patriotic song. Part of that is, of course, the reason that the chorus is so rousing. Why do you think, June, Bruce paired the music and the pace he chose for a song with protest lyrics?
Oh, well, yeah, it is one of the most misunderstood. He wanted to write, I think, a political song, a protest song, but because so many people, maybe not a protest song per se, but so many people don't pay attention to the lyrics. So it's maybe in order to get people to listen to the song, he'd have the rah-rah moments. Those who wanted to actually, maybe once they liked the song and really paid attention to it, maybe they would look to the liner notes when they had liner notes and actually read what the song was about. Maybe that was, I don't know if that's the intention, but maybe it was. And then you have other songs. I'm thinking about American Skin, 41 Shots, another one that was misinterpreted, which of course it wasn't a huge hit. But I think it's also part of the serious verse and the fun verse again being part of the same song. But you have 4 or 5 minutes to put a message across, and sometimes pounding on the head, you know, that would people not listen to that, but they may listen to part of it and then go back maybe later and see something they didn't know before and learn something about themselves and the song.
And of course, when you listen to the slow kind of acoustic rendition of that song, it immediately
then the
becomes
meaning is
apparent what he
immediately clear.
means.
Yeah. And that's the song, the version that I like.
I have a question. I'm going to kind of shorten this question and comment here a little bit, but it's about the meaning of "we take care of our own." Do you think there are different ways that that song or that saying, "we take care of our own," could be interpreted?
Well, yes, because the song we don't take care of our own. That's the problem. This song is meant to be ironic. I taught a class at the Newberry a library here in Chicago a few years ago, and I called the title of the class "We Take Care of Our Own?" Social justice in the music of Bruce Springsteen, because the problem is, and that's part of the criticism he has of the U.S. That so many people are left behind. And he addresses those issues in the songs. And in this particular song, there's a lot of, if you look at the lyrics, he's talking about Katrina and and different aspects of that. But the whole message of the song is we should take care of our own. And if it was a just country, and if people lived up to the teachings of Jesus Christ, then it would not be the problems that we have today. So it is meant to be intentionally an ironic song.
Someone is bringing up a similar question about Wrecking Ball. Do you think there are similar connotations there?
Yes, it's a similar kind. He compares the destruction of the stadium in New Jersey and how it compares that to this destruction or the situation in the United States, especially during the time when Wrecking Ball came out, after the Iraq War, all of that, all those aspects, the war, the social justice aspects, are all in that. And back to Wrecking Ball on the album, Jack of All Trades is one of the angriest songs he's ever written, I think. And again, it's about social injustice and inequality and the fat cats on Wall Street kind of thing. So I call Wrecking Ball his great social justice album. It's also maybe one of his more underrated albums, although it did well at the time. But I think it's so many songs on those albums come with a social justice theme.
Okay, we have time for one or two more. Did anyone want to unmute and
yes,
ask?
John Barry. John Barry, unmute. There he is.
Sorry, I've been a bit of a pest here. Somebody had mentioned kind of a dichotomy of, now I lost it, Bruce kind of being the bleak Bruce and the patriotic Bruce, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking for the comment here.
The bleak Bruce? Bleak? The serious Bruce and fun Bruce? That's what I said.
Yeah. So
that you mean?
One thing that I've always been taken with is growing up as a kid and seeing my sister Eileen's original albums of Darkness on the Edge of Town and other ones. I just they were always so bleak to me and morose as a little kid. I was not drawn to them at all. But getting to see Bruce through my wife's eyes, who grew up on the Jersey Shore, when I went to see Springsteen on Broadway, I got it. I really got it. And I think a big reason I got it was because, if I'm not mistaken, that was built off his autobiography. So I think Bruce writing prose spoke to me because I'm a journalist more so than the music. But the one thing that struck me when I went to see Here Now and had my mind shredded into a million pieces was that Bruce takes us down the dark alley. He takes us to Atlantic City. He takes us to the streets of Philadelphia. He takes us, what is the line? Madman bummers and drummers in the summer.
Indians in the summer.
Yeah. There's a lot of
early Bruce, yeah.
And even Born in the USA. But he never leaves us hanging. He always has a Rosalita. He always has the Born to Run and, wrap your hands around my engines, man. We're gone. I'm out of here. Floor it. Get in that hot rod and we're gone. It's kind of like, this is going to sound crazy, but it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. He takes us to the witch's castle, but he puts us back on the balloon and he says, fans on the beach in Asbury, look at your ruby slippers. You had the power to go home the whole 3.5 hours that you've been here. It's not me, it's you. So
Right. For all of this
what I'm
together.
getting at is Bruce never leaves us hanging. Yeah, he takes us down that dark alley, but he brings us back to the splashdown and the soft, gentle landing and says, thanks for coming. We hope you get home safely. And, you know, that says to me that Bruce is as much an idealist and, like me, a sucker for the American dream, who realizes that there is no top of the mountain. There's no golden moment where you say, I get it, I understand it all. It's always striving. Even all his hundreds of millions and his successes, and that guy, man, after seeing him at Sea Here Now, he is always striving. He's never going to stop striving until we don't want to see the day they cart him away, but he is chasing the American dream as much as I am. And that is my connection with that guy. And it's very special.
Thank you. I think striving and striver is a great word to use. And he always ends his shows with optimism.
Oh, he pokes fun at the band, you know.
Fun, yeah.
But
Is
John,
there anybody alive out there?
Yeah.
John, I'm surprised
I mean,
you found those early albums bleak, because even on Nebraska, you had the song Open All Night. And on Darkness, you had Promised Land.
Right.
So, I mean, even in those dark albums,
Not all bleak.
moments always of joy and brightness, upliftingness.
Well, it's life.
yeah,
It's life.
I gotta say, I'm coming from a very, very different place. I think from all 65 of you, I really am coming. I think I'm on this side of the fence. Well, I can still reach you and embrace you, but it's really, really been eye-opening. And I've been, you know, I embrace that bleakness, and, you know, my hometown and born in the USA just knocked my socks off, not in a great way, when I was in high school. I mean, I got that out of the gate. Like, wow, you know, 2 cars at a light, the gun in the back seat. I mean, that's heavy stuff.
But then you had glory days.
But then you had glory, exactly. And there you are, you know, Wizard of Oz, we're out of the woods, we're out of the, sorry to be singing, but you know, when they're racing through the poppy field, that's glory days. That's Rosalita. Bruce never leaves us hanging. He says, thanks for coming. And he gives us a little nudge out to the parking lot. Says, get home safe, gang.
On that note, actually, we have come to an hour, and I'm a stickler for keeping these to an hour. So I'm going to tell this gang to get home safe. But first, I want to make sure June has the last word. June, thank you so much. You've been a tremendous guest, and you did such a great job handling these questions on the fly. Is there anything you'd like to add before we end?
No, I just want to thank you for your interest and for your time. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, June. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope to see some of you in person at our Bob Dylan lecture with Dr. Sean Wilentz on January 30th. If not there, maybe we'll see you for the next episode of Conversations with Our Curator in February. We'll be sitting down with Josh Davidson to talk about his book, In Cahoots in Asbury Park. So it's a look at the hyper-local music scene. With that, everybody, again, you can find us on springsteenarchives.org or the social media of your choice. Thank you, June. Thank you, everybody. Get home safe.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.